Welcome to the Chapter 5 Excel demo. I am going to be demoing the entire chapter for you. What I am not going to do is spend a lot of time on the formatting. I know these videos get really long, and as we get into the more advanced types of things, it can really take a long time to cover everything. So what you can see on your screen is I've already done the first handful of steps that are outlined on page 304 of your book, and I will not bore you with a lot of formatting unnecessarily. So to get started on Chapter 5, I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to do. Chapter 5 encompasses a table and some database functions. Because Excel acts as a database in a lot of instances, they have incorporated some database functions. It doesn't have full functionality like Access as a database, but Access and Excel get along very well, and you can go from one to the other pretty easily when you're dealing with loads of data. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Remember, when we're dealing with this as a database, it's a fairly small database, but some of these functions would prove a lot more useful if you had a database of, say, 10,000 records or something like that. So when I refer to sort of the database thing, don't just think of what's on your screen, but think of, the broader application of a really large database. So the first thing we're going to start with is creating a table. And just like we created our data table before, we have to define that for Excel. And there's a couple different ways to do it. The book uses the format as table function, so that's what we're going to use today. You can go back and forth. You can make it a range, and you know what a range is. It's just a selection of cells. Typically they're all together. So a range can be converted to a table, and a table can be converted back to a range. And the difference is a table is sortable and filterable, and a range is not. So there are some functions you can do in a table that you can't do in a range, and vice versa. So we're going to start out by creating our table, and to do that I'm going to highlight the information that contains my field names. And then I'm going to apply a format. So I'm going to go to the Style toolbar, and I'm going to apply the format Medium 3, which is right here. And you can see the category is Medium, and then it's Style number 3. So I choose that, and it says, where's the data for your table? And I've already selected my range previously, so it picked up on that, and it said, is this the range you want? And it is, except I have headers. And those are the headers that I've highlighted. So I just check the box to tell it that those are my headers, and I click OK. And you can see that Excel then added this additional row to the range I had already selected. And that's the first bit of data in my database that I'm going to add. Once I have my table formatted in a basic way with a quick style, then I'm going to go in and format the rest of my cells here so that my data will display nicely. So I want to center a few things, and this I'm going to change to a date format that looks like that. I'm going to add comma style to this, and I should be good to go. Next I'm going to change my quick style, and what I want to do when I do that is I'm going to come in here and right click on the style that I picked for my table, and instead I'm going to say duplicate. I'm going to make a copy of this current style, and I'm just going to tweak it a little bit to make my things a little bit easier to read. So I'm going to give this a different name. I'm going to call it custom. And I'm going to click Format to tell it what I want to do differently. So I want to change this to bold, and I want black font. Click OK, and then click OK. So when I add information to my cells here, everything should be black bold. And then I'm going to change this to white so it's easier to read. So I've created my style, and then I need to apply it. I'm going to click this down and choose Custom. That applied it to my table. And then for my titles, I want to come in here and tell that white. And now I'm ready to begin entering my data. When I do that, I'm going to start with this blank row that Excel gave me to enter my data in. And you want to make sure, check and double check that when you're entering your data, it's correct, because that will influence your results. And it looks like I forgot to reduce my decimals here, so I'm going to decrease decimal, not indent. Decrease decimal here. There we go. That looks a little bit better. Now when I'm ready to move on to the next row, I hit Tab and it gives me another line in my table, all within my table, because I could click below it, but then that wouldn't work when I go to sort my data. Now this is kind of a cool feature. When I press the F to type in full time, it pops with the another entry that began with F is. This is a great feature for data entry, because a lot of times with data entry you have 3 or 4 items that go in a column, and you just type the first letter or two and it'll pop the one that you're looking for, and you can just press Tab instead of having to type the whole thing. It makes for great fun when you're doing data entry. I'm just going to check my numbers quickly here. And everything looks good. So I'm ready to enter my third record. Enter this third record here. They don't make these names any too easy to enter either, so that's why I double check that your spelling is correct and your numbers are correct. Oop, I just made an error there. And you can see there's that database feature again. Just click Tab. There it is again. It doesn't work so well with numbers, but it does work great with any kind of text. And if you don't want the thing that pops up, you just keep typing what you do want and it will go away. Okay, now it wants us to add more rows, because we could continue on like this and that's no big deal, but it actually just wants us to drag this down to H21 so that we have room for 10 new records. And then you'll enter the rest of the records in the order as shown on page 310. Okay, so I've entered all of my records. I've double checked to make sure everything is correct as written in the book, that it all agrees. And now I've realized, oh, I'm speaking as the employee, of course, that I really would have liked to have a percentage of quota field. And it's okay to add fields to your table like that. In order to create another field for my table, I'm going to select I8. I'm going to type % of quota, and then I'm going to select J8 and type grade. There were actually 2 fields I neglected to add, quote unquote. I didn't really, that's just how the book has you do it. So it's easy, and it automatically, because it was touching those, each of the fields was touching the table, it automatically assumed that those were intended to be part of your table. Next, we're going to write a formula here that will give us the % of quota. All right, we're going to write the formula for this field. We're going to do this a little bit differently. We're going to use the ampersand, which gives Excel the information to pull the information to be used in the formula from that field. Because we're working within a table, which is a database, we can use the field name. And then it doesn't matter where, what row, what record, or what column this is in. It's going to look in our table in this field for this record. It's a really long explanation. Let's go through it. Equals, so doing math, and then I'm going to start with a square bracket, and I'm going to type this ampersand, and then it's going to give me a list of my table fields. I'm going to choose year-to-date funds raised, and then I need to put a closed bracket there so that it recognizes because each bracket has to have an open and a close. They have to match. And then I'm going to divide this by the quota field. So again, square bracket, ampersand, and I'm going to choose quota here, and when I give that a square bracket, it lights up, and that's how you know it's correct. Now, if you neglect the ampersand, your selection will be the whole column. You have to have the ampersand. That limits it to within this record, look in this field and this field within this record. So I'm going to press enter, and it said, well, this is a table, and we use all the same data within the same field, so it applied that formula to all of my cells going down. If I double click, you can see the formula down here that is applied, but it's within this record. So that's what the ampersand does. Without that, you get an error. You'll get a big error. Moving on to creating a lookup table. The next thing we're going to do for this assignment is create a VLOOKUP table. And to do that, you'll need to set this grade table up like so. It's important that the grade items be in the order stated in the book, because what you're going to do is you're going to create a test. It's basically another version of like an if-then statement. You're going to create a test that will run down these columns. And what it does is it tests the data against the information in this column, L column, or percent of quota column in this case, and returns the information in this column. So even though this column looks like it's backward, it really is not. It's really in the correct order. Because what it will do is it will take, for instance, we'll use 84.28% as our sample data. It will look in this column and say, is it 84? No. So then it goes to the next one. Is this 84? No. Is this 84? No. Is this 84? No. Is this 84? Well, it's more than 84, so it will come back down and it will return the information in this field. That's how it does the testing. You can set a VLOOKUP to be exact, where it would have to be exactly equal to what's in here, or to the next nearest amount without going over. So in that case, that's what we're going to do here, so it goes to the closest grade. For this, we're going to write a formula, and I'm not going to go through setting this up because it's just exactly what I just explained. There's nothing tricky about it. You're just typing in the information and formatting it. So next we're going to type in the formula, and the formula looks like this. Hello, pay attention, we're doing something important, right? The equal sign, equals, and then our function, VLOOKUP, and I'm just going to pick it from this tag that popped up, VLOOKUP, and it's I9, comma, so I9 is what I'm looking up, okay? Then that's the lookup value. What are you looking up in the table? And the next thing is the table array. Where do you want to look in for your information? And in this case, we want to use L3 to M7 as our table array. So I just selected it, comma. And the next one is column index number. This refers to the column that contains the information you want returned. In this case, it's column number 2. This is column number 1. This is column number 2. And we want the second column data return. It's like looking up a phone number in a phone book, right? You would look up the name and pull out the phone number. Well, in this case, we're looking up a percentage and we're pulling out the grade. So we want to pull out the information in column 2. And there's one more thing, the range lookup. That refers to whether or not you want it to be exact or not. And in this case, we don't need it to be exact, so we're not going to do anything with that. I'm just going to add my parenthesis at the end. And I'm going to click Enter. Now, what you'll notice is I got a goof. And I did that on purpose so you can see what a goof looks like. Give you a second just to think about what caused this error. I'll check this formula. That looks okay. Now I'm going to check this formula. Alright, and I'm going to check this formula. What do you notice? My range is off. Why is it off? It's off because I did not use absolute value for my range. So I just went up, clicked on there, added the absolute values in so that my range stays absolute, and I press enter and it updated all my formulas and I'm good to go. So let's just double check. If you had 97.89, you should get an A, and that's what you got. So you can double check your data that way and make sure that everything is working correctly. There's also something called an HLOOKUP table. The book mentions it briefly. You don't actually ever do an HLOOKUP table in this class, and in fact, in all the time I've ever worked in Excel, I've never had a reason to use an HLOOKUP table. Basically, it's horizontal lookup instead of vertical lookup, so the data runs the other direction, side to side instead of up and down. I don't know why you would use that instead of a vertical lookup table. I prefer the vertical because it makes more sense to me. Okay, we're going to move on to the next step in this document here. And we're going to do some conditional formatting. We're going to use an icon set this time. So to apply an icon set, we're going to do conditional formatting. And I'm going to do new rule. I know icon set is here already, but we're going to edit some of the information. So we're going to go new rule. We're going to choose icon sets. And then we're going to choose the 5 arrow option, colored arrows. And we're going to change all of these to numbers. And we're going to change the number values. So 0.9, 0.9, 0.8, 0.7, 0.6. There we go. And greater than or equal to, so we're all set there. We click OK, and we get our symbols. So you can see a C is a sideways yellow arrow, an A is a green up arrow, and we don't have any red down arrows to speak of in this database. But it really just gives a quick glance. You don't have to evaluate the data. You don't have to look at the letter symbol. You can just see at a quick glance who's doing very well and who's doing not so hot with their fundraising. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a total row to our database here so that things get totaled automatically. And I'm going to scroll up just a little bit so you can see the bottom a little bit. I'm going to click into my table. It doesn't really matter where as long as you're clicked in. And then we're going to add our totals. So we're going to go up to Table Tools here, and we're going to check the total box. You can see it added a row to the bottom of our table for totals. And then I'm going to click down in here under Amount Raised, and I'm going to select Sum because there's different things I can choose for different items. And I'm going to average the years of experience. And I'm going to sum my quota. And the count is already there for the grades. Then it has you check the first column, last column, and banded columns. So what this does is we already have banded rows. That's the alternating colors in our rows. And when you click banded columns, what that does is it gives your columns every other column different formatting. It varies based on the table style. This isn't a very good table style to display this on. And then if you choose first and last column, it would give it a completely different format color for depending on the style that you had. Like I said, this one isn't a very good one to see it, but that's what that does. The next thing you're going to do is prepare to print your document. So I do File, Print, and you would say Print Active Sheet. We're going to change that to Print Selected Table and change that to Landscape. And then we want to fit this to one page, which is right here. So it squinches it down a little bit and adjusts it so that it would fit on one page. If I click print, send it to the printer. I'm not going to print it because I don't need to. But if you want to, feel free and go ahead and print it. Actually, printing it is a nice way to check your data too and make sure that you haven't had any errors. Errors can be hard to see on your screen. They're a lot easier to catch on a piece of paper for whatever reason. All right, that concludes part 1 of this Chapter 5 video. I'm trying to expand the sections a little bit more than I have in the past, but I don't want to make them so long that they're not doable in a single sitting. So I'm going to stop here, and please continue with part 2 of this demonstration.